In Battle of Gods, when Beerus first encounters Goku, he casually taps him to gauge his power. After doing so, he remarks that Goku likely wouldn't be able to defeat Frieza. This statement seems to contradict what we were previously told in the Buu saga, such as comments suggesting that someone like Vegeta could easily eliminate the entire tournament in just his base form. These kinds of conflicting statements are a part of why so much ongoing debate about Dragon Ball Super's power scale. So let's start by tackling the core question: is this even possible? To answer that, we need to look at Goku's character. Goku has always been a fighter driven by the desire to improve. He's constantly training to become stronger, always pushing towards greater limits. Throughout Dragon Ball Z, his growth in strength is nothing short of remarkable. One of the most striking examples of this is from the Saiyan saga leading into the Frieza saga. In just 6 days of training on his way to Namek, Goku managed to surpass the entire history of his race, excluding figures like the legendary Super Saiyan or the gods. At the start of that period, he was significantly weaker than Vegeta. Yet, by the time he arrived on Namek, he was strong enough to stand toe-to-toe with Frieza's final form, after receiving a powerful Zenkai boost. That kind of rapid growth is extraordinary. Through Zenkai boost gradually becoming less effective over time, Goku continued to train relentlessly. After the events on Namek, he pushed his strength even further while stranded on Yardrat. By the time he returned to Earth, he had become so powerful that Trunks stated Goku could have easily defeated both Mecha Frieza and King Cole with little effort, possibly even just using a finger, as Trunks had demonstrated with the same technique. All of this showcases just how quickly and dramatically Goku can grow in power, even within short windows of time. And it helps explain how Goku's strength could vary so widely depending on where you're looking in the series, which in turn is why debates like this one exist in the first place. Then we're introduced to the androids, synthetic warriors capable of effortlessly defeating Super Saiyans. Even Gohan, despite his immense potential and rigorous training, couldn't stand up to them in future Trunks' timeline. This was the grim reality Goku was trying to avoid, so for 3 years he dedicated himself to training in order to surpass not only the androids but the other Super Saiyans as well. Not long after, Cell appears and absorbs these already formidable androids. These are the same androids that could have overwhelmed Goku, who had trained intensely for 3 years. Cell, after fusing with them, becomes a new threat altogether, but then Goku enters the hyperbolic time chamber, trains for a single year, and comes out with enough power to defeat those same androids in an instant. You see where this is going. Goku's growth in strength has always been exponential throughout the series. Now imagine him undergoing even more rigorous training for 7 whole years. Post Cell games leading into the Buu saga, that's exactly what happened. So when you ask whether Goku could reach new heights even in his base form, the answer is yes, it's entirely within reason. Now, one of the key arguments against the idea that Goku's base form could rival or surpass someone like Frieza comes from Battle of Gods and Dragon Ball Super. The moment Beerus slightly taps on Goku and remarks that he doesn't think Goku could defeat Frieza, not even in Super Saiyan, has become a central point for those who believe Goku's base isn't as strong as Frieza. But let's dig into that scene a bit deeper. After Goku transforms into a Super Saiyan, Beerus still doubts whether he could win against Frieza. He even adds, "Maybe you are," showing a hint of uncertainty. Many fans interpret this to mean that even a suppressed Super Saiyan is definitely stronger than someone at full power in base form. But that interpretation has some flaws. Let's take an example from later in the series during Resurrection F. Goku is shot by a simple laser while in his Super Saiyan Blue form. This moment sparked debate, but the truth is Goku had suppressed his power to such an extreme that he was actually weaker than his base form at the time. We've seen base Goku even in the Namek saga shrug off Frieza's death beams that would be much stronger than this laser here. So if he had been operating at full base level strength, he wouldn't have been harmed. This clearly shows that transformations like Super Saiyan or Super Saiyan Blue don't automatically mean the character is stronger if they're heavily suppressed. Power scaling in Dragon Ball depends on not just the form, but how much power the user is choosing to tap into at any given moment. And that's an important distinction that often gets overlooked. So yes, it is possible for a Super Saiyan to suppress themselves below their normal base form, especially when they've achieved the level of a Mastery Super Saiyan. At that stage, they have complete control over their power output, allowing them to fine-tune it like any natural state. This makes it very likely that Goku was simply suppressing himself when Beerus tapped him during their encounter. It's also important to note that Beerus has a habit of provoking others to get them to fight at their full potential. He's been portrayed as somewhat manipulative, often using psychological tactics to push his opponents. For example, he repeatedly threatens to destroy Earth during his battle with Goku, clearly trying to draw out Goku's true strength. We also see this similar behavior when he slaps Bulma, an act that seems brutal on the surface, but she turns out to be relatively unharmed. This could suggest Beerus was holding back significantly just to ignite Vegeta's rage and provoke a stronger response from him. This is notable when you consider that earlier a flick from Beerus nearly incapacitated Buu saga Goku, yet a slap wasn't able to do any damage to Bulma. Later on, Beerus even tells Goku that he's the second strongest fighter he's faced. We later find out in Dragon Ball Super that this was a setup for Monaka. And what was his goal? to continue motivating Goku to keep going stronger ahead of Universe 6 vs 7 tournament. Then there's Tarble, Vegeta's younger brother. If you recall, when Tarble meets Goku, he's surprised by how weak Goku's power level seems. This is another clear example of Goku heavily suppressing himself. Tarble, a character Raditz once dismissed as insignificant, also mentions that a fighter named Abo, from the duo Abo and Cabo, has power comparable to Frieza. And what happens next? Goku and Vegeta hear the name Frieza and simply laugh, sending Goten and Trunks, still just kids, into their battle against Abo and Cabo. Remarkably, the two young Saiyans defeat the duo while remaining in their base forms. Of course, Tarble couldn't have known the full extent of Frieza's power, especially his final form, since Tarble never witnessed Frieza's full transformation back on Namek. But Goku certainly had, so when Goku hears Frieza, he naturally assumes it's referring to Frieza at his peak, his final form. This matters because Goku's first actual encounter with Frieza was after all of his transformations, meaning his baseline for Frieza's strength has always been that final form, unlike Vegeta. All of this points to a consistent trend. Goku, in even his most powerful forms, is often holding back or operating far below his full potential in casual or unexpected situations. And that tendency has led to a lot of confusion when it comes to comparing his base strength form to characters like Frieza. Later on, Goku does witness Frieza at full power, so when the name Frieza comes up in conversation, it's safe to assume that Goku is thinking of the Virgin specifically. So, when Goku and Vegeta hear that Goten and Trunks should be able to handle someone comparable to Frieza, Goku is likely picturing final form Frieza at his peak. This is especially important when you consider that Yo-Son Goku and his friend Returns is officially considered canon, something confirmed when Dragon Ball Super references Tarble, the character introduced in that special. Now, let's examine some evidence that supports the idea that Goku is indeed stronger than Frieza in his base form. First, consider Piccolo during the Android saga. At the time, he had surpassed Goku's Super Saiyan power level from the Namek arc, before fusing with Kami. After training alongside Goku and the others for 3 years, Piccolo had gained enough confidence to believe he could take on the androids himself. 19 and 20 without a question were far beyond Frieza's level, and yet Piccolo was able to defeat them easily. There's also the commonly debated claim made by Vegeta during the World Tournament when he boasted he could defeat anyone there, a group that included characters like Android 18 and fused Kami Piccolo. Now, whether base Vegeta could defeat Kami Piccolo is a little more uncertain, but it's not entirely out of the question either. However, Vegeta's pride and arrogance often color his statements, so it's a bit of evidence that remains shaky at best. Another notable moment is during the Buu saga when Goku faces Yakon and Vegeta battles Pui Pui. At the time, Supreme Kai showed genuine concern over whether the Z fighters could handle these threats, although he believed they could take on someone like Frieza. He wasn't confident they could beat Yakon or Pui Pui, suggesting that they were at his level at least. However, those doubts were quickly put to rest when Vegeta easily defeated Pui Pui and Goku took on Yakon using only his base form at first. It's worth noting that Goku likely could have defeated Yakon without transforming, but instead chose to go Super Saiyan to nullify Yakon's dark-based energy absorption by flooding the area with light. Even so, Goku was able to sense Yakon's energy and fight effectively, when just in his base form. This brings up an interesting point. It's possible that both Yakon and Pui Pui were above Frieza's level. While Pui Pui may fall short, Yakon certainly appears stronger than Super Saiyan Goku from the Namek saga, given that he was able to absorb some of Goku's energy and still remains in the fight, despite Goku being far more powerful than he was 7 years prior during the Cell games. All of this suggests that by the Buu saga, Goku's base power had reached a point where even beings potentially stronger than Frieza were no longer real threats. Someone like Yakon shouldn't have been able to make a massive Super Saiyan Goku even flinch, let alone push him back. Another piece of supporting evidence, though considered non-canon by some, comes from the anime filler. If you're someone who prefers to focus on the manga or canon material, you might choose to disregard it. However, it still offers valuable insight. In the Otherworld Tournament arc, Piccolo was shown to effortlessly defeat both Frieza and King Cold, overwhelming them in a single swift attack, as well as Super Perfect Cell. What's truly interesting is that after a short period of training in the Otherworld, Goku in his base form was able to outmatch Piccolo. This means base Goku at the time had already reached a level where he could replicate Piccon's feat, easily defeating Frieza and King Cold without needing to transform. Not only that, but base Goku was also capable of knocking away Perfect Cell during this arc, launching him back into his containment. While you can assume Cell might have been holding back in the scene, the fact remains that Goku did this in his base form, which is still an impressive feat considering Cell's overall strength. Then there's Gohan, who also provides strong evidence of how far the characters had progressed by the Buu saga. The Daizenshuu, an official guidebook for the Dragon Ball series, mentions that base Gohan could defeat Kibito if he were to fight seriously. This is particularly noteworthy because Kibito himself is implied to be powerful enough to eliminate someone like Frieza without much effort. Let that sink in for a moment. Gohan without transforming is regarded as a rival to Kibito. All of this comes together to support the idea that by the time of the Buu saga, characters like Goku and Gohan in their base form had reached levels of strength well beyond that of Frieza. The evidence, whether from canon or supplemental sources, strongly points to this conclusion, making this matchup not even close. One of the most popular ongoing debates in the Dragon Ball community revolves around versus battles, pitting a character against another in a hypothetical matchup. From the beginning of the series, fans have enjoyed imagining fights between characters who never actually clashed on screen. And as the story progressed, it became just as exciting to consider rematches between characters, only now using their stronger later versions to see how the outcome might change. One of our most well-received discussions on the channel explored a scenario where Buu Saga Goku went up against Namek Saga Frieza. Naturally, if Frieza had to face a Super Saiyan 3 level opponent, the fight wouldn't last very long. But to narrow down the question and make it more interesting, we look specifically at Goku's base form during the Buu Saga versus Frieza at full power on Namek. If you haven't seen that video yet, be sure to check it out on the channel. In this video, we'll be applying the same idea to Vegeta. Could base form Vegeta during the Buu Saga defeat 100% full power Frieza from Namek? We'll find out. If you enjoy conversations like this and want to take part in deeper Dragon Ball discussions, I highly encourage you to join the Dragon Ball HQ Discord server, link below in the description. We'll be diving into this topic and more over there. Now, without further delay, let's begin. One interesting thing about the discussions of base Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z is that after Vegeta and most other Saiyans unlocked their Super Saiyan forms, their base forms were rarely used in serious combat. It wasn't until the Majin Buu saga that we saw Vegeta actively fighting in his base form again, specifically during his match against Piccolo. For now, let's examine Vegeta's base strength leading up to this point so we can better understand how powerful he was at the start of the Buu saga. Looking back, one of Vegeta's biggest boosts in his base form came during his fight with Frieza on Namek. After being blasted at point-blank range in the chest by Krillin, Vegeta experienced an enormous Zenkai boost. Before this, he was already showing surprising strength, holding his own in a power struggle against Frieza's first form. Something that even surprised Frieza himself. At the time, Frieza's battle power in this form was around 530,000, while Vegeta's was estimated to be between 200 and 300,000. Following the Zenkai boost, Vegeta was able to react in ways that others could not. Notably, he saved Gohan from a death beam fired by Frieza, a blast that neither Gohan nor Piccolo could detect. This is significant because Piccolo at the time was comparable in strength to Frieza's second form, whose power level was roughly 1 million. Based on these feats, Vegeta's power after the Zenkai is generally estimated to have been in the 1 to 2 million range. Stronger than Piccolo, but still notably below Goku's 3 million battle power upon arrival. After being killed by Frieza, Vegeta was revived and trained extensively over the next 3 years in preparation for the android threat. At this point, he had a considerable gap to close. Both Goku and future Trunks were already Super Saiyan while he was not. Determined to catch up, Vegeta specifically asked Dr. Brief to build him a gravity training chamber reaching 300 times Earth's normal gravity, triple the intensity Goku used on his journey to Namek. Using a basic linear scaling approach, we can estimate just how strong Vegeta might have become after his intense 3 years of gravity training. I want to preface this by saying that this is indeed linear scaling, and likely a conservative estimate, but it proves a reasonable framework to argue that Vegeta's power grew far beyond his previous levels. To gauge Vegeta's growth during these 3 years, it helps to look at Goku's progression under similar conditions, albeit for a much shorter time and under less gravity. After his battle with Vegeta on Earth, Goku received a Zenkai boost roughly comparable to Vegeta's, since both suffered similar injuries. Goku's situation, however, might have even been more severe since he was temporarily unable to move or speak without the use of telekinesis at one point. For example, while Vegeta's power rose from about 18,000 to 24,000, we can say that Goku went from roughly 8,000 to 14,000. Then, after training for 6 days in 100 times Earth gravity before arriving on Namek, Goku's full power skyrocketed to 90,000, a roughly 6.43 times increase. Keep in mind, Goku didn't stay at 100 times gravity the entire time. He gradually worked up to that level, which was the peak of his training. Applying this same logic to Vegeta, who trained under 300 times Earth gravity for 3 years, his base power could theoretically reach around 22,894,856. For those interested in the exact calculations, I'll post a full breakdown on my Discord server, Dragon Ball HQ. This number is almost certainly a lowball since Vegeta, being a prodigy, might have experienced even greater gains than Goku. However, unlike Goku, Vegeta didn't have access to sensu beans to instantly recover and push through exhaustion, which would have limited his training immensely to some extent. Interestingly though, in the DBZ anime filler, episodes show Vegeta already surpassing 300 times Earth gravity even before achieving Super Saiyan, performing exercises like finger push-ups and 400 times gravity. And this would suggest that the gravity figures we just came up with is also an insane lowball, but we'll use it for the sake of the video. Moving forward, we see a massive leap in Vegeta's power when he trains inside the Room of Spirit and Time. It's here that Vegeta manages to close the gap between himself and fighters like Android 18 and Semi-Perfect Cell. While his primary focus in the chamber was to surpass the limits of Super Saiyan, it's reasonable to assume his base form also experienced tremendous growth as a result of his training. Vegeta entered the time chamber twice, spending a total of 3 to 4 years inside, though it's unclear if he used a full 2 years during his second visit. Given that the time chamber is a far superior training environment compared to the gravity room, assuming Vegeta achieved at least the same gains he did from gravity training is a very safe, if not lowballed, estimate. Under this conservative approach, his base power would have increased 3 to 4 times, bringing him to approximately 68,684,568, or if he used a full 4 years, 91,579,424. Now, some might argue that Vegeta didn't grow as much stronger during his second stay since he didn't surpass Goku or Gohan, but that's not a valid counterpoint. By this stage, both Goku and Gohan as Master Super Saiyans were far ahead of Vegeta, meaning there was still plenty of room for him to improve without catching up to them entirely. In fact, Vegeta left the time chamber confident that he could defeat Cell. Before Goku fought Cell, he asked Vegeta if he could go first, and Vegeta replied that Goku could do whatever he wanted, but that he, Vegeta, would be the one to finish Cell off for good. For him to make such a claim, he would need to believe that he had at least grown strong enough to defeat the perfect Cell that beat him earlier, which implies a significant increase in strength. Evidence that we're still heavily downplaying base Vegeta's power by this point comes from future Trunks. In his base form, Trunks was able to send Imperfect Cell flying at an incredible distance before the bio-android could recover. Given that Vegeta and Trunks were portrayed as roughly equal in strength during the Cell games, both were able to hold their own against the Cell Juniors. It follows that Vegeta's base form was already formidable. If base Vegeta could physically overpower Imperfect Cell the same way Trunks did, who scaled above full power Frieza significantly, then even with conservative estimates, he should have been capable of defeating Frieza with ease during the Cell Saga. After the Cell Saga concludes, we get a 7-year time skip leading into the Buu Saga. During this time, Vegeta trains relentlessly, not only to achieve Super Saiyan 2, but also to close the gap between himself and Gohan. If we apply the same conservative scaling earlier, 7 more years of intense training would make him roughly 7 times stronger than before, giving him a base power level of 480,791,976 or 641,055,968 if you assume massive gain. Either way, this is well beyond full power Frieza's level, even under extreme lowball considerations. The narrative also supports the idea that base Vegeta at the start of the Buu Saga could easily destroy many previous villains. For instance, Vegeta confidently stated he would win the 25th World Martial Arts Tournament in just his base form. This is notable given that competitors like Android 18 and Piccolo, both vastly stronger than full power Frieza, were also in this tournament. Some might dismiss this confidence as Vegeta's ego, but that's not entirely accurate. Vegeta has shown multiple times that he can acknowledge when others are stronger than him, such as admitting that Trunks and Goku were stronger than before when they were a Super Saiyan, or when he warned the Z-Fighters they were doomed against Mecha Frieza's arrival. Furthermore, when Vegeta made his confident claim about winning the tournament, he also clarified that this would apply only if no Saiyans were allowed to transform, which would be self-admitting that a rusty Super Saiyan Gohan in the Buu Saga would beat him if he wasn't able to turn Super Saiyan as well. This shows that his confidence wasn't just blind arrogance. He genuinely believed his base form at this stage was strong enough to beat nearly everyone else in attendance. When you add in the fact that Shin's reactions and overall demeanor during the events of the Babidi ship suggest that his power may not be on par with the base Saiyans, surprise at the sheer strength displayed by Goku and Vegeta in their base forms implies that he likely viewed him as weaker in comparison. Shin's reactions and overall demeanor during the events of Babidi's ship suggest that his power may not be on par with the base Saiyans in his own right. His surprise at the sheer strength displayed by Goku and Vegeta in their base forms implies that he likely viewed himself as weaker in comparison. This supports the idea that Piccolo's hesitation to confront Shin was not purely due to an assumed power gap, but perhaps out of caution or uncertainty. Pui and Yakone, while visually imposing, were nowhere near the level of Goku, Vegeta, or even Gohan in their base form. Shin's visible concern during these encounters, whether in suggesting that they should fight together or reacting to the shock of the Z-Fighters' confidence, further emphasizes the gulf in power. Dabura and Babidi themselves even identified Gohan, Goku, and Vegeta as the 3 strongest warriors present, placing the Supreme Kai below even their base forms. This assessment was also made before they even witnessed the Saiyan Super Saiyan transformations, just their base form, even when factoring in Gohan's lack of training time. Babidi and Dabura never listed Piccolo or Krillin among the top fighters, signaling that they were not viewed as major threats, and that Vegeta in his base form would be stronger than this Kami-fused Piccolo, who is vastly stronger than Frieza. So base form Vegeta would beat the hell out of Frieza in the Buu Saga, and there's really no competition. Making this fight not even close. At first glance, Frieza vs Piccolo might sound like a fight we already know the outcome of, but during the Android Saga, things are very different. By this point, both characters have evolved far beyond what we saw on Namek, and their scaling might surprise you. Frieza, now rebuilt as Mecha Frieza, claimed his new cybernetic body made him even stronger than before. Stronger than the tyrant who once forced Goku to reach Super Saiyan just to survive. His power, durability, and energy output were all enhanced through alien technology designed to perfect his body. But Piccolo, during the Android arc, isn't the same Namekian that got humbled by Frieza's second form. Even Even before fusing with Kami, Piccolo's power skyrocketed to the point where even the androids considered him one of the strongest fighters on Earth. So if these two were to clash, Frieza, or Mecha Frieza at his absolute peak versus Piccolo, would the Emperor of the Universe's new enhancements be enough to close the gap? Or would Piccolo's divine evolution completely erase the nightmare of Frieza once and for all? In the manga, the impending return of Frieza as Mecha Frieza sets the stage for disaster. Only this time, he's accompanied by equally intimidating father, King Cold. As Frieza awaits his possible destruction, Vegeta gives Piccolo one of the first genuine compliments, acknowledging him as a true warrior after Piccolo suppresses his ki so well that no one else even realizes he's there. Soon after, the classic Mecha Frieza and King Cold versus Super Saiyan Trunks encounter unfolds. However, there's an often overlooked detail. Frieza declares himself the strongest in the universe right in front of King Cold, and interestingly, King Cold doesn't dispute it. This silence implies that Frieza really is stronger than his father. Even so, King Cold is no pushover. He's confident enough to think he could assist in a fight against the Super Saiyan Goku rather than being instantly obliterated. It's worth remembering that on Namek, the entire premise of Frieza's battle with Goku centered around Frieza's ego and his obsession with being the universe's most powerful being. If King Cold could simply transform and defeat Frieza with ease, Frieza likely wouldn't have been so fixated on that title, even if he'd still resent losing to a Saiyan. After Trunks delivers one of the most iconic introductions in Dragon Ball history, we learn that Piccolo has been training relentlessly ever since day one. This reinforces a recurring detail in Dragon Ball, which fighters often suppress their ki and operate at a casual level until they're ready to attack. This would also explain many of Piccolo's earlier power readings throughout the series. We also see Super Saiyan Goku easily blocking Super Saiyan Trunks' sword slashes, even though he kills Frieza moments later with a single finger, a detail that becomes significant later. Goku also notes that Trunks wasn't going all out in their sparring. Another interesting note is that Piccolo, standing over a mile away, can hear every word of their conversation. Finally, in the Viz translation, Trunks mistakenly refers to androids 17 and 18 as 19 and 20, though the context makes sense hearing this clear. With the android threat looming, Vegeta, Piccolo, and the rest of the Z fighters dedicate the next 3 years to training relentlessly, preparing for the worst possible scenario. As Krillin bluntly puts it, if they didn't think they could handle what was coming, they shouldn't have even bothered showing up. This moment becomes a key part of Piccolo's development, showing just how far he's come from his earlier days of training. Later in the manga, we actually get a glimpse of this progress when Goku invites Piccolo to train alongside him and Gohan, sparring against him while even in his Super Saiyan form as shown in the manga. In the anime, we see just how intense this training actually got, and Piccolo actually manages to draw blood from post-Yardrat Goku, which is impressive considering Goku had already spent a year training after defeating Frieza and was vastly stronger than Piccolo's previous self. Clearly, the effort Piccolo put in after the Garlic Jr. arc very much so paid off. When the android conflict finally begins after the time skip, Goku steps up. However, his heart virus cripples him mid-battle, leaving him unable to finish off Android 19. Interestingly, Tien doesn't notice anything off about Goku's performance, likely because he can't fully gauge with the difference. While Piccolo immediately realizes that something's wrong, he knows Goku's true power firsthand after training with him for years. Ultimately, Vegeta steps in, transforming into a Super Saiyan for the first time and utterly destroying 19. Piccolo even comments that Vegeta might be stronger than Goku at this point. It's also important to note that 19's strength was multiplied after absorbing Goku's energy, which makes him much tougher than before. That battle even drains Vegeta's stamina enough that Dr. Gero, Android 20, considers himself capable of defeating him if given the chance. Later, Gero absorbs energy from both Super Saiyan Vegeta and weighted Piccolo, yet Piccolo still annihilates him with zero effort. Once he gets serious, the Z fighters are left in complete disbelief. Piccolo's new power is so overwhelming that they even start comparing him to a Super Saiyan. This naturally raises some questions. Just how strong is base Gohan at this point if Piccolo was this powerful? And what would that mean once Gohan transforms into a Super Saiyan himself? Piccolo even begins to wonder if the androids they warned about weren't as terrifying as expected, or if the Z fighters have simply grown far stronger than anyone could have imagined. Now, when talking about Frieza, let's begin with the version that most fans remember, his initial form, calmly seated in a hovering pod executing Nameks with effortless precision. According to official sources such as Daizenshu, Frieza's first form has been listed at a power level of 530,000. This number is significant. Not only is it the highest scouter confirmed figure at that point in the story, but it completely dwarfs the strength of every Z fighter on Namek. To put it into perspective, Captain Ginyu, the most powerful member of Frieza's elite squad, caps out at 120,000. Both Sengai Vegeta reaches somewhere between 250 and 300,000. In this state, Frieza effortlessly dominates Vegeta, Krillin, and Gohan without breaking a sweat. He isn't trying, he isn't powering up, just casually dismantling them as though it's a game. It's also worth noting that Frieza's fighting style is rooted in control and superiority. He prefers to humiliate his opponents while remaining composed, choosing to fight in his weakest form as a way to assert dominance. Despite Vegeta's repeated Zenkai boosts throughout the arc, Frieza never once considers him a real threat, highlighting just how vast the power difference truly is. And this is only the beginning. When Frieza evolves into his second form, the entire tone of the battle shifts. For the first time, the heroes experience genuine fear. Unlike the calm arrogance of his earlier state, this form is far more aggressive and expressive, a sign that Frieza is finally beginning to take things seriously. He declares his power has doubled. If we assume he was fully utilizing his first form's potential at 530,000, that would place him at around 1.06 million. However, since he likely held back before, many estimate his power were closer to 1 to 1.2 million. Frieza's transformation shakes the very planet, the ground fractures, and shockwaves tear through the landscape. The violent winds erupt. It's visual shorthand for the massive escalation in power we're witnessing. His cruelty also intensifies. One of the most infamous moments of the arc occurs when he impales Krillin on his horn and tosses him aside, a chilling demonstration of his sadism. Even Gohan's desperate-fueled rage outburst only manages to stagger Frieza briefly before he recovers unfazed. The message is clear. The gap between the heroes and Frieza has grown insurmountable, and the nightmare is just beginning. The key takeaway here is that Frieza is still toying with his opponents. Only now he's doing so with far greater power. He doesn't appear truly pressured until Piccolo begins to push him, and even then, Frieza hasn't transformed out of necessity. At this point, it's still just a display of dominance rather than a genuine fight. Many sources and fans suggest that second form Frieza could reach as high as 1.5 million, especially if he was suppressing his strength early on. Still, a more conservative range is 1.1 to 1.2 million, which fits the narrative best with the power scaling presented. Then comes Frieza's third form, which is arguably his most disturbing transformation in both design and demeanor. This form is monstrous, his skull stretches back, and his features become razor sharp. His entire presence exudes alien malice, clearly influenced by classic sci-fi horror aesthetics like Xenomorph, and his combat style reflects that same chaotic energy. Where his second form was still measured and strategic, this one is sheer savagery. Frieza shrieks wildly, unleashes relentless energy barrages, and attacks with a brutality that feels almost sadistic. While there is no official number tied to the transformation, the character makes it clear that Frieza's power surges dramatically once again. Piccolo, who had managed to hold his own against the previous form, is instantly overwhelmed here. But all of this pales in comparison to what follows, which is final form Frieza. The monstrous exterior appears, replaced by a sleek, elegant figure radiating quite confidence. His transformation isn't about intimidation, it's about control, refinement, and deadly precision. In this form, Frieza's demeanor changes entirely. He doesn't yell or overexert himself, he stands calm, collected, and barely moving, yet utterly in command. Despite Vegeta receiving several Zenkai boosts, he's completely outmatched. Vegeta unleashes his full might, hurling attacks and bravado alike, but Frieza deflects everything with casual ease. Arms crossed, smiling faintly, effortlessly, and maintaining his superiority. Even now, it's implied that Frieza is still holding back significantly. Most underestimate this restrained version of his final form, somewhere between 3 million and 20 to 30 million, depending on how serious he's fighting at any given moment. When Goku finally arrives, the battle intensifies. Goku pushes himself with Kaioken times 10 and even Kaioken times 20, yet Frieza continues to overpower him. Goku eventually channels a massive spirit bomb, gathering energy from across Namek, and while it hurts Frieza, it doesn't defeat him. He rises from the explosion, battered but alive and furious. For the first time, Frieza stops holding back. He announces that he'll fight at 100% power, and the transformation that follows is pretty explosive. His muscles expand, veins bulge, and his energy flares violently across the battlefield. This isn't the composed, efficient Frieza we've seen before, it's raw, unleashed power. Although there are no official scouter readings at this level, both Goku's Super Saiyan performance and guidebook data constantly place Frieza's 100% power at 120 million. This marks the peak of Frieza's might and the absolute weight of his strength before the tide of the battle finally turns. Now, when comparing Piccolo to Frieza, it becomes evident that even before his fusion with Kami, Piccolo had already far surpassed Frieza's power level. From a narrative standpoint, Mecha Frieza served as the initial benchmark for the Z fighters after the Namek saga, a power level that upcoming androids were expected to surpass easily. In fact, the androids were hyped to be strong enough to defeat Trunks just as effortlessly as Trunks had defeated Frieza. Piccolo had already exceeded Frieza's strength. There would have been no logical reason for him to feel confident about facing the androids at all. It's also worth noting that Piccolo trained alongside Goku for 3 full years in preparation for the androids' arrival. In the manga, he's even been shown sparring with Super Saiyan Goku during this time, implying that he was capable of keeping up with him to some degree. Considering that only after a few days of training on King Kai's planet back in the Saiyan saga, Piccolo managed to exceed what Goku achieved there in an entire year. It's completely reasonable to assume that 3 years of focused training with Goku would elevate his power to a tremendous new level. This growth is entirely demonstrated when Piccolo faces Dr. Gero. Despite Gero having absorbed energy from both Vegeta and Piccolo himself, Piccolo still dominates him with little effort. This version of Dr. Gero will logically be far stronger than Android 19, the same android who was able to overpower a heart virus affected Goku. Keep in mind that even while suffering from the early symptoms of the heart virus, Goku still managed to impress Tien, who had previously sensed the power of Yardrat Goku, a version of Goku strong enough to one-shot Frieza with a single finger. Taking all of this into account, it's undeniable that by the time of the Android saga, Piccolo could have effortlessly defeated Frieza without breaking a sweat. The gap between them wasn't close. Piccolo had long since moved past that level of power. Let's be real. Back on Namek, Frieza was a monster. A being so far beyond anything the Z-Fighters had ever faced that even sensing his power was terrifying. But what happens if we take the Earth's strongest fighters, Krillin, Tien, and Yamcha, and pit them against Frieza in his prime Namek saga form? Now before you laugh, remember that these guys didn't stop training after Namek. By the time of the Android saga and beyond, they had massive power-ups training alongside Saiyans who were casually busting planets. So the question is, could the humans that once cowered in front of Frieza actually beat him now? If you enjoy conversations like this and want to take part in deeper Dragon Ball discussions, I highly encourage you to join the Dragon Ball HQ Discord server. Links below in the description. We'll be diving into this topic and more over there. Now, without further delay, let's begin. Throughout the Namek saga, Krillin's power undergoes one of the most impressive and underrated growth arcs in Dragon Ball Z. His strength evolves rapidly, not just from his potential being unlocked by Guru, but also through a steady progression of battle, experience, and adaptation, almost mirroring the Saiyan trait of growing stronger after each intense encounter. By the time Krillin faces the Ginyu Force, his strength had already skyrocketed. With a recorded power level of 13,000, he's already surpassed the threshold of a planet buster, as El Maga Legendario notes that the power level of 10,000 is enough to destroy a planet. That alone puts Krillin in elite company, but he doesn't stop there. As the Namek battles intensify, Krillin's power once again multiplies, this time by nearly 7-fold, reaching roughly 75,000 by the time he and others confront Frieza. At this point, he completely eclipses every member of the Ginyu Force aside from Ginyu himself. If we apply that same destructive potential scaling, this would theoretically place Namek-era Krillin's output at dwarf star level strength. An absurd leap for a character who just arcs earlier struggled against Nappa's attacks. Unfortunately, after Namek, power levels are no longer provided, and Krillin gradually fades from the main combat lineup. By the Android and Cell sagas, he's clearly outclassed. Against Perfect Cell, Krillin's attacks are meaningless, and even against the androids, he plays more of a support role than direct combat. The manga version of the Buu saga continues this trend, and Goku outright tells Krillin to stay back since the threats are far beyond his level, and he's eventually turned to stone by Dabura, ending his participation in the arc. However, the anime continuity paints a slightly different picture, giving Krillin and the other humans a significant power buff. For example, Yamcha is shown taking on and defeating both Olibu and Gorilla simultaneously. Impressive, considering Olibu is capable of fighting evenly with base Piccolo, who himself could one-shot Super Perfect Cell. This matters because by the time of Dragon Ball Super, Krillin has grown exponentially stronger and is consistently referred to as the strongest Earthling. This claim is further supported by his inclusion in the Tournament of Power, chosen over Yamcha and other potential candidates. Based on this scaling, this version of Krillin easily surpasses Super Perfect Cell, putting his strength comfortably within the solar system busting range at bare minimum. It's even more impressive when you consider his brief encounters with Cell Max. When Krillin is clearly outmatched, the fact that he isn't obliterated suggests his power is at least fractionally comparable to Cell Max's. Even a tiny fraction of that strength will place him in the universal tier range, or at the very least, close enough to be considered within the same general spectrum. Naturally, this level of power would extend to his speed as well. Krillin by this point would scale to being massively faster than light, supported by countless feats, calculations, and scaling chains that place modern Dragon Ball characters at astronomical levels of power and speed. So in short, while Krillin's relevance as a frontline fighter faded in Namek, his long-term growth, especially in Super, suggests that Earth's bravest human evolved far beyond his early limitations, ultimately standing above the universe's most capable mortal. Tien remains the strongest human on Earth entering the Saiyan saga, a title he continues to hold throughout the early stages of Dragon Ball Z. After training intensely to prepare for the arrival of Vegeta and Nappa, Tien's power level skyrockets to around 1800. Making him the strongest Earthling behind Piccolo and arguably behind Gohan when the boy's emotions surge. Despite this growth, however, Tien finds himself outmatched by Nappa, who possesses roughly twice his power. Even the signature Tri-Beam technique proves ineffective against the Saiyan warrior. However, this shouldn't be seen as a failure on Tien's part, and even Goku with a power level of 8,000 acknowledged Nappa's extraordinary toughness. In the following arc, Tien spends his time training on King Kai's planet. Within the anime continuity, this training pays off tremendously, as Tien's power increases over 20-fold. He's even shown fighting members of the Ginyu Force who have power levels between 40 and 50,000. It's worth noting that the anime operates as its own canon, with events approved by Toriyama, meaning these feats are valid within that version of the story. At this point, Tien's power would easily reach large planetary levels, even possibly dwarf star tier. However, once resurrected, the difference between him and the later threats like Frieza and the androids becomes much clearer. He far outclasses them. That said, Tien's Neo Tri-Beam exists in a league all of its own. Fans will recall that he was even able to damage and hold down semi-perfect Cell, an accomplishment beyond what most characters could achieve at that stage, bearing Super Vegeta. In the Buu saga, Tien returns briefly to intercept a blast from Buu tanks aimed at Hercule and Dende. Though the act is brave, he immediately admits he's outmatched, and overall scaling doesn't change from this encounter. He has no meaningful comparison to Dabura or any major Buu level threat. However, when moving into Dragon Ball Super, Tien's relevance fluctuates. During the build-up to the Tournament of Power, he's portrayed as one of the weaker members of Universe 17, struggling to keep pace with base Goku during training sessions alongside Gohan. However, as is common in Super, power scaling becomes inconsistent. By episode 106, Tien displays a massive leap in strength. During a battle against a sniper sniper from another universe whose attacks are strong enough to blow off both Piccolo's arms and threaten Ultimate Gohan, Goku, and Vegeta, Tien uses his multiform technique, dividing his power into 4 bodies. Even with this power split, however, he endures direct hits without visible damage and ultimately overpowers the sniper using the Tri-Beam. Though this may seem unbelievable compared to his earlier showings, it's hardly the first time Super has ever portrayed sudden power jumps. Based on this, at minimum, Tien appears comparable to base Saiyans, when including his Tri-Beam. Therefore, even a restrained or weakened Tien surviving such power is remarkable. At the very least, his Tri-Beam manages universal levels of destructive potential, while the high-end interpretation places him well into the multiversal range. Consequently, his speed would also scale to an extreme easily within the massively faster than light category, especially since characters far weaker than him have demonstrated the ability to cross universal distances with incredibly short time frames. By the time of the Saiyan saga, while Yamcha is weaker than both Tien and Krillin, he still holds a respectable power level of 14,000, placing him roughly on par with Raditz. When the Saiyans finally arrive on Earth, Yamcha faces off against one of the Cybermen, and contrary to popular belief, he actually wins the battle with ease. His death only occurs after the Cyberman self-destructs, completely catching him off guard. In fact, the series explicitly points out that even Krillin would have died in the same situation, emphasizing that Yamcha's loss wasn't due to lack of strength, but sheer misfortune. In the manga, Yamcha sits out the Namek saga entirely and he remains dead at the time. However, in the anime continuity, things unfold pretty differently. Yamcha, alongside the other fallen Z fighters, trains on King Kai's planet, eventually battling the Ginyu Force and even managing to defeat Raccoon himself. Considering that stronger Ginyu Force members, including Guldo, have power levels ranging from 40,000 to 50,000, Yamcha's growth during this period is immense, about 33 times stronger than his Saiyan saga self. At this stage, Yamcha easily reaches multiplanetary to dwarf star levels of power, as far weakened characters have already demonstrated planet-busting capabilities or caused dwarf star level explosions. By the Android saga, he would logically be several times stronger, still roughly 4 to 5 times this level. Although Yamcha's appearance during the Android and Cell saga are limited, mainly his encounters with Android 20 and his brief struggle with the Cell Juniors, there's actually more to unpack regarding his strength than most fans realize. When Androids 19 and 20 first attack Yamcha, they completely mistake his energy signature for base Goku's, implying his key output matched the data Jiro had recorded for Goku's projected strength. Jiro's estimates were based on Goku's growth after Namek, and he knew about Frieza and King Cold, but not Super Saiyan, meaning his expectations for Goku's base power were already astronomical. If we interpret this correctly, Jiro may have believed base Trunks was strong enough to defeat Mega Frieza, unaware that Trunks' victory came from being a Super Saiyan. This means that by extension, Yamcha's energy being mistaken for Goku's would place him above Mega Frieza's level, a being with a power level of at least 150 million, making Yamcha star level or possibly solar system level in the anime continuity, depending on how you interpret Frieza's surviving Namek explosion. This scaling, however, depends on whether Jiro's data truly reflected Frieza's power or just his genetic potential. Regardless, this theoretical scaling is overshadowed by what happens later in the Buu saga. By this time, Yamcha has stopped training seriously, but upon being sent to the other world, he experiences another dramatic increase in strength. There, he manages to defeat both Olibu and Gorilla simultaneously, performing an even better feat against them than Piccolo did. This is the same Piccolo who effortlessly one-shotted Super Perfect Cell. In other words, by the end of the Buu saga, Yamcha had become powerful enough to solo the Cell games, reaching solar system level or beyond in terms of destructive capability. As for speed, he scales completely to base Goku after the Cell games and base Piccolo, both of whom are shown traveling across universe-sized distances within the other world in brief moments, putting Yamcha's speed at quadrillions of times faster than light at the very least. Now, when viewed through the lens of Dragon Ball's evolving power scale, factoring in both the Z and Super continuities, it becomes clear that the Earthling strength has been dramatically underestimated. Krillin, Tien, and Yamcha each began as martial artists bound by human limits, but by their relentless training, exposure to divine ki, and consistent participation in universe-threatening conflicts gradually elevated them to a level that defies their origin. By the end of Dragon Ball Z and well into Super, these three are no longer weak side characters, but rather warriors whose power far eclipses anything Frieza could have imagined during the Namek era. Their feats, statements, and contextual scaling place them comfortably above the solar system tier, and by association with the god-level fighters they battle alongside against, even brushing into lower echelons of universal potency. This isn't a mere exaggeration either. It's the logical result of exponential power growth that defines Dragon Ball as a whole. If Goku and Vegeta's base forms can reach divine levels through training and exposure to God Ki, then the humans who have sparred, adapted, and survived alongside them for decades must scale correspondingly. Krillin's combat parody moments with Super Saiyan Blue Goku, Tien's ability to restrain opponents who threaten Gohan and Piccolo, and Yamcha's anime feats against Piccolo tier opponents all indicate a staggering leap in strength and speed, well into the realms of faster than light, star level, or even universal magnitudes. In essence, the human trio represent the ultimate underdog evolution, beings who began as mere martial artists on a backwater planet and through sheer will and adaptability ascended to standings amongst godhood. All three of them would easily beat Frieza, without even trying at this point in the series, and even before the end of Dragon Ball Z, depending on the scaling, making this matchup not even close.